The Real Sounds of Africa there to once again kick off our World Football phone-in. 08085 909 693. Welcome to a new Premier League season. 08085 909 693. If you've got any questions on football in Europe and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues, and of course questions of Philippe Coutinho, well, give us a call. 08085 909 693. Yeah, I've got a feeling that the Scousers and the Spanish are going to dominate the conversation. 08085 909 693, which is perfect, of course, because Coutinho's a Brazilian and the legendino Tim Vickery is over that side of the water for us. Take care of any questions on South American football and players from over there playing in our leagues, including Philippe Coutinho. Tim.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm very Coutinho. How are you doing?
Yeah. You've really been brushing up on your pronunciation. You've been doing that. You're practicing that one in front of the mirror.
Yeah,
I would estimate.
Yeah, well, at least I can say Jessica through Nayana Puram. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, all right. Don't show off now. One of the many tragedies in my life is that I've still yet to meet Mina Rzouki. Didn't happen in my brief little visit to London. Yeah. I thought we might run into each other last Saturday at Wembley when my lot won a heroic pre-season 2-0 victory over her lot.
Don't overdo it.
Sent them back to Turin to think again. Mandali a casa para le fratelli. But it wasn't to be. Our paths didn't cross, and sadly, not yet. Not this time.
Mina Rzouki.
Why did you call me for a coffee?
Yeah. Sorry. I think reason number one is I don't have your phone number.
May I suggest that you both get a room, because we've got a phone in to get through, okay? 08085 909 693.
We're just discussing that we couldn't get a room, honestly, Doctor.
Look, let's just talk football, if we can, anyway. And
right,
Mina,
okay,
of course,
next time I come over, we'll share a room in the Holiday Inn over the road.
You make a terrible internet husband.
Yeah, there you go. Mina Rzouki, the Colonel, is here to answer any questions you've got on European football and football from over there playing in our leagues, footballers from over there playing in our leagues. So, Mina, great to have you back. It's always a pleasure. You know, when you're not on air, you get so many questions on the World Football phone.
Do I? Do people start asking you when you're like, oh, when she next comes back?
No, they don't even say that. Can you ask Mina this? And we'll see if you get as many questions tonight. Let's start off with Philippe Coutinho, because this is the story of the beginning of this season, this Premier League season. Will he go or will he stay? Will he play for Liverpool or will he never play for Liverpool again? And the question from Aaron to you, Mina, is: would you still take Lucas Moura over Philippe Coutinho? One is going to Barca, and the other's on the PSG's bench.
Okay, fair point. No, I wouldn't take Lucas Moura.
And for those who don't know, this refers back to an earlier comment that Mina made, and that she has to live with forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, I did see a lot in Lucas Moura, and I am a little bit. I guess Tim always said that he didn't see what I saw, so perhaps there was another one I saw a lot in that never worked out either. But I'm not going to mention his name because I was mortified by that. Listen. I'll be really honest, I still don't think Coutinho is of Barcelona's level. I think he's a very good player, and I think that he benefits from playing in the Premier League in the sense that there is a lot of space there. And Fabregas once made this spectacular comment, which I think really applies, and he said, football in England is really fast-paced. It's just constantly moving. It's so fast, but you have less time on the ball in Spain. And I don't know if there's a clear difference there in the sense that you really do have to think fast and really overcome quite technically brilliant players in the Spanish league. And I'm not entirely sure Coutinho is up for that challenge. Again, I've said to you before that, I wasn't a fan, and then he obviously turned out to be one of the better players for Liverpool. I had a problem with him in the sense that I thought Inter somewhat, not ruined him, but perhaps didn't give him the right support when it came to building him up athletically. You felt like he was a little bit injured. He wasn't really keeping up with the physicality that was demanded of him in that league. But he came to the Premier League and definitely proved that he was the talent that he was the guy that we all saw something in him when he was coming to Italy. Everyone saw those videos and thought, wow, he's really special. Never lived up to his reputation, moved to the Premier League and actually did. But again, there was a spell in Liverpool when, he was injured last season, came back and still wasn't really unlocking those defences. If you look at them, and last season, they were a team that was so good when they were counter-attacking or when they were facing sides that were willing to play football, because then they could use their space and their pace and the space to hurt them, with their speed. But when they were given the initiative, I don't think Liverpool were excellent necessarily at dominating. And this is where I don't see him as being the player that makes a huge difference on that level. I'm just saying that if I had 100 million, I'd probably wait to activate Griezmann's release clause or pay 200 million to bring someone like him over. But, I definitely take Coutinho over Lucas Moura, not now. But I guess based on foundations, sometimes that has, I thought Deulofeu was going to be the next big thing. And I'd love to see anyone who thought differently when they watched him too.
Okay, Tim.
The fascinating thing for me here is that neither of us saw Felipe Coutinho coming. I watched him right at the start with Vasco da Gama, and there was a lot of hype about him, and Inter Milan snapped him up at the age of like 15.
Yeah, you didn't see that in him? You didn't think he was special then?
No, I didn't. And I watched him for a year and a half or so in the Vasco da Gama first team, and he was only a kid, and he was already, Inter Milan couldn't take him till he was 18 and so on. And when I look back at my memories of him, my main memory is of him wandering across the field with the ball with his right foot. And I thought, well, this fella, there's not enough about him. He's just too one-footed. And he's not, perhaps just not vertical enough. There's just not quite enough about him to justify the hype. And then he went to Inter Milan, and let's face it, at the end of the day, Inter Milan just gave up on him. They let him go for a song, and if Liverpool sell him, they will make the most stupendous profit. They'll make £100 million profit on him, So I didn't see it coming. And I put this out on Twitter in Portuguese recently, and loads of Vasco fans said, no, well, we didn't see it coming either. Italy didn't see it coming. No. And it's come.
So what made the difference?
Can I just ask you, do you think he's that kind of guy that you would take on when you sold Neymar? Do you look at Coutinho as being of the same level as Griezmann or Neymar? Well, obviously not Neymar maybe, but that level, sort of the ones that are just under the top 4 or 5 players in the world?
Based on what I've seen from him in a Brazil shirt over the last 12 months, I would. He's won me over. And I take your point about that form with Liverpool and the fact that Liverpool didn't tend to beat the sides that you'd expect them to beat. Yeah. But I saw him unlock really good, I saw him unlock a very tight Paraguay defence in World Cup qualification, and it was him who did it. And he did the same thing with Argentina. I wonder with him if the confidence aspect is so important, because also for Brazil, he spent a long, long time flattering to deceive. A long time. He played World Cup at under-17 level, and he was a disaster. He played World Cup at under-20 level when they won it, but he was nowhere near. And Oscar was the star of the team, and Coutinho wasn't that outstanding. And at senior level, there were times when, especially because his natural position is Neymar's position, hence the fact that Barcelona are knocking on his door, and he had a fair few opportunities there because Neymar spent so long suspended. It took a long, long time, and Brazil were eliminated just over a year ago in the Copa Centenario in the group phase. In the middle game of the 3, he scored a hat-trick against Haiti. In the other 2 games, it was against Ecuador and Peru, he didn't score, Brazil didn't score, and he didn't do anything. And I thought then, no, he's just a rabbit killer. I wonder, new coach has changed everything, and I wonder if part of it is that he might be a little bit shy, a little bit one of those more timid kind of people, a confidence player who perhaps doesn't have it naturally, who needs to be instilled with confidence, and maybe that explains some of the downs he's had along the way. Now, in terms of what happens from here, and I'm fascinated with this, because I'd love Mina's opinion. She's much closer to this than I am, because I think it depends on what Liverpool wants. I think if Liverpool decide to put their foot down and keep him, they can do it. If they decide they don't want the money, then I think they can.
But he's already put in
keep him.
He's put in a transfer request, Tim. Once the player does that, you may as well get rid of him. His head's already in Spain.
It depends.
But he's under contract, and first, I think he's a good professional. He's not the fella, and he's been happy at Liverpool, and he's got a side that's kind of built around him. There's no real reason for him to be unhappy. He just thinks he could be even happier at Barcelona. So I don't think he's the kind of bloke to throw a strop, and also it's not really in his interest to throw a strop and sulk in the reserves or something, because at the end of this season, it's World Cup. So he wants to keep himself in nick and in form for that. So I think if Liverpool put their foot down, they can keep him and have the player firing on nearly all cylinders for the course of the season. But it's an awful lot of money. It's an incredible profit. Which way, Mina, do you think this saga will go?
Well, this is the thing. Someone asked me this question. I was doing Monday Night Football, and they were saying about Gylfi Sigurdsson, and I said, if I was Everton, I wouldn't be paying 50 million. But to Swansea, he's worth more than 50 million, because to Liverpool, Coutinho is probably what's going to make the difference between top four or not, if I'm honest. If you have these two, the likes of Sadio Mane and now Mo Salah, but you still need a guy who's going to have the vision, who has the quality to unlock defenses. Otherwise, you just have two really fast players who can, score the goals, but you still need service. And I think Coutinho will make the difference as to where they end up in the league. And that, for me, is he is probably worth more than 100 million to them, because at this stage of the season, who are they really gonna get? Who are they going to have that can honestly replace the talent of Coutinho? And not only that, but embed himself within the tactics, within Klopp's system, have the fitness level required of his exhaustive tactics to actually make the difference immediately, rather than having to wait halfway through midwinter. So I understand this is where it comes really hard, because this transfer market, it's really horrible to certain teams, because like to Barcelona now, who've lost Neymar, and possibly Liverpool, who could end up losing their best player, they don't have time to find quality reserves, because everyone is too scared of losing their players at this stage of the season when we're about to kick off. So this is why, firstly, I think that should be changed, because we need to help out these teams and not leave coaches with absolutely no quality players towards the end of the transfer market. But I totally understand if Liverpool want to stamp their feet. Like I said, and like you said, you think Coutinho is a professional. I think he'll do what's required of him. But sometimes it could be a blessing in disguise. Perhaps if he doesn't move to Liverpool, rather move to Barcelona, it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe he'll go there and not, have the best time ever, or maybe he'll be benched, or maybe he won't prove himself, because I do think it's a much harder league for him to prove himself in. But anyway, like I said, Liverpool have a choice to do both. I understand it must be horrible to have a player there that's very unhappy, and he's making it clear that he's ambitious enough to try himself at Barcelona. So it's a really tough conundrum, but if they want to prove themselves, then they've got to keep him, right? I personally would let him go.
I'm waiting at the moment for all of because right at the start of the summer, I was saying, we can line these transfers up like dominoes. And if Neymar goes, then the next domino to go, the pressure will be on Coutinho from Barcelona to leave Liverpool. It's not saying that he will, but that's what I got so much flack from Liverpool fans. So much. Well, apparently they're in for Dembele of Dortmund as well. But I think they had lined up Coutinho as kind of replacement number one, I think. And I got so much flack from Liverpool fans.
Yeah, I remember.
This will never happen. You're making up fake news. Yeah. Funny how none of them have come back on Twitter to apologise.
There we go.
They will
but what I did, the rumour that we were discussing this quite a bit initially, actually, and what I was reading, or what a lot of guys were saying, we are conspiracy theorists, yeah? So the whole point of what they were saying was Coutinho was always going to be a person they were looking at, whether they lost Neymar or not. He was always a player that they thought can add a certain quality to Barcelona, and especially because of his relationship with Neymar. But the guy that they really do want is Dembele. But Borussia Dortmund are holding out for such an exorbitant fee, knowing how much money Barcelona have now because of the Neymar sale, that that they're making it look like they're after Coutinho, full on, so that they can get a cut price on Dembele. And if they had to choose, they'd rather Dembele, because for them Coutinho was an added bonus, but it's for an actual replacement for Neymar and someone that can really take on the mantle and build and be something special for the future, they were looking at him. So I wonder whether or not who is actually their number one target and whether it is Coutinho at all.
How devious football clubs can be, eh? How devious they can be. And I have noticed that Mina brought up a really interesting fact, which maybe some listeners want to talk about later on, about when a player is transferred, he's worth X amount of money for the team that he's been transferred to, but arguably some players are worth even more than that to the clubs they're leaving. Interesting point. Let's speak to Darren in London first of all, though. Darren, good morning.
Hello, Don.
You okay?
Hi, Don. I've got a question for Mina.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Mina.
Hello, how are you?
Hang on, Mina, are you having a sip of something whilst we're doing again? Yeah. This is the second. I've got to issue a yellow card this time. There's a yellow card for Mina producing it. Yellow card. I
forgot to mute the microphone. Okay.
For goodness sake!
The only way she can get through 2 hours with the likes of us is with plenty of liquid.
Of course. Just not when you're about to talk. Though. Anyway, Darren, go ahead. Go ahead, Darren.
Hi, Mina. Last time I spoke to you, last time you was on, you were asking about a players for AC Milan, and you was talking about they need like captain / leader type players.
Oh no, you're going to ask me a question about Bonucci, right?
No. I know they've signed Bonucci, but apart from Bonucci, what are your views on the other signings? And do you think they can probably be the biggest threat to Juventus this season in Serie A?
Oh, that's interesting. Whether or not they can be a threat. Look, Milan have made some really impressive signings. I'm going to say, honestly, none as impressive as Leonardo Bonucci because, firstly, he's a winner. He's a clear leader. You know, he's probably the best centre-back in the world, second only to Sergio Ramos. And I would say they're on par. And he brings a certain, ambition that very few other players have. But other than that, I'm really interested to see Frank Kessie has been amazing. They've brought him over. He's been taught by Gasperini. He's a sensational player and one who's been exceptional when it came to the preseason friendlies. And Montella's really excited about him. I think Lucas Biglia will make quite a difference in midfield. Just added a little bit quality to that. Can help their other youngsters to liven up their game and has extraordinary vision, really, really familiar with Serie A as well, although he'll be out with injury for a month. But really, I think also barring Bonucci, the best thing that they did was actually keep Donnarumma, their goalkeeper. And he is sort of the symbol of their youth team. A goalkeeper they really believed in. They actually trusted him and gave him a debut when he was the youngest ever, stayed with him, and then they thought they were going to lose him because his agent is Mino Raiola. But managing to secure him and then give him the likes of Bonucci ahead of him, that's going to give them a defense to work on and a foundation that will propel them forward. They still need a striker, and that's going to make a difference. They have players going forward, but perhaps not that star striker that can really secure the goals because it's not going to be Carlos Bacca. So I would say that they're looking at the likes of Fiorentina's Kalinic, although he's now been linked to Everton. But I don't think they're going to be hugely competitive this season because, as you said, there's just so many signings. It's over 200 million worth of signings. And that's going to take a while to find the right tactical system to I don't know, I guess bring out the best in all of these ones. And also that a lot of them are youngsters or ones who perhaps don't have the experience to make it a winning season straight away, barring Bonucci. So I think it will take them a little bit of time. Napoli is really the team to watch, and that can really challenge Juventus because they haven't changed too much. And they've gone back at injured players and the likes of Milik, and they can really have a good run at it. Roma just changed coaches, so again, not sure. And I would say Inter, largely because they have Luciano Spalletti, and he's probably one of the most underrated tacticians, but really one who created the blueprint for Italy's win in the World Cup in 2006. He's a superb tactician, not the best man manager, but he's got a good team to work with. Him and the director are on board. He's worked with them before in Sabatini, and they have a good team, and they've always sort of underperformed. So if he can actually get Inter ticking on, and firing from all cylinders, then I genuinely think they'll be the biggest competition that Juventus have.
I was going to ask about the strikers as well. What is your view on Andre Silva I mean, he's got a very good record with Porto, but also for Portugal. And when he plays with Ronaldo, I know, normally it's like always about Cristiano, but I think I read a stat about him. He's scored, whenever he's partnered Ronaldo in a team, he's scored more goals when he's been on the pitch with Ronaldo than Cristiano himself.
He is genuinely a great talent looking forward. But I think what's the most interesting about Andre Silva, which is actually a great signing for Milan, like you said, is the fact that he has a certain ambition that you rarely see in these types of players. He is genuinely always desperate to win, and he looks like he's consumed by the game, like nothing else in his life matters but this football match. And it's something that honestly I haven't seen since watching Luis Suarez in the Dutch league, and it's that kind of genuine hunger that you have, and I think he's superb. Ronaldo loves to play with him. He's got a high footballing IQ, really great finish, and sort of like the natural born striker. I think there's still a lot for him to learn, and tactically, this is probably the best thing for him to grow on a tactical level and to grow his IQ in that sense. But generally, one of the better ones going forward. If, like I said, if they can bring in another striker, then I think that their forward line can really go quite far, and Milan could be something exquisite, especially under Montella, who's very good at bringing out the best in these types of players. Okay,
may I just say thank you very much as well.
Thank you.
You're a gentleman, Darren. Appreciate that. Thanks very much for the call. 08085 909 693. If you'd like to join in the conversation this morning, we're talking football in Europe and South America, and of course, discussing the kickoff of the Premier League as well. It's one I like from one of our listeners. My 5-year-old son, William, is sports mad, especially football. We were talking about Stadia when he asked... This is from a 5-year-old. We were talking about Stadia when he asked me a really good question. Which stadiums are in the busiest surrounding areas? Well, I suggested we ask the question on the World Football Phone-In. So in your various regions in South America, which stadia are in the busiest regions?
Like, you mean as in my neighbourhoods?
Yeah, in the neighbourhoods. Should we start with Tim first of all?
And anything that's not built kind of out of town, isn't it? The kind of purpose built out. I was thinking about this actually on Saturday at Wembley. When
you and a 5-year-old were thinking about this. What does that say about you?
Yeah, I mean, my mental age doesn't quite reach 5. I think sometimes on a good day. Maybe Saturday was a good day. It was certainly the day when we sent Juventus home.
We know.
Okay. It's different.
Mandarli alla casa per le frettere. And Wembley's kind of poised on this little hillock thing.
Yeah.
Send them back home to think again.
Wait, if you win any Premier League matches in Wembley, then you can start talking, okay?
Yeah. How about you just do something in the World Cup? I mean, why don't you do something in the Champions League first?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, okay. Good point, well made.
Yeah, and we'll come back to Broadway Danny Rose soon as well.
Up on the hill. You've got this wonderful panoramic view of northwest London. It's really not very scenic, is it, at all? The busiest regions tend to be the older stadiums, don't they, when they weren't purpose-built out of town. And Vasco Stadium is built right in the heart of it was an old working class area in Rio. It's increasingly become a kind of underclass area. When it was built in 1927, it was a kind of picnic attraction of a Sunday to go up on the hill and watch the construction work taking place. You can't go up on that hill anymore because it's a massive favela. So that's a very, very busy region, and around the ground it's just full of like Pentecostal churches and bars. There's a fight between God and the devil going on in the streets around Vasco's ground. It's too old to be one of those purpose-built, out-of-town, antiseptic grounds.
How about in Europe? Any stadiums come to mind?
Well, I would say the Bernabeu is in central Madrid, and that's sort of, around all the shopping areas. It's sort of bam smack in the middle of the city. In much the same way, like, are we talking about like sort of how Stamford Bridge is in the middle of the city?
Yeah, exactly like that, yeah.
Yeah, then I would say that. Also... Oh yeah, Rayo Vallecano, which is the other team in Madrid, one of the Madrid teams, but it's in it's perhaps not the most beautiful of stadiums, and you have like these apartment blocks next to it where you can actually watch the game if you overlook it from one of those.
Those are the good old days.
Which is, it's like bam smack in the middle of the like the town. Then you've got the other ones which are a bit like there's the Besiktas Stadium in Turkey, which is again in the middle. If you stay at a certain hotel, I forgot which one it is. You can also look at it from a certain room. You can actually just watch an entire football match
from only one room,
from the comfort of like a side of the rooms. I don't know, but I remember at the time, I think it was Erdogan who was prime minister before he became I don't know what president. Would used to stay in that hotel all the time and conduct his meetings, and a few of us thought that he was probably a Besiktas fan, and that's why he always did it in the Intercontinental Hotel so he can watch all their games. But that's another example of it. San Siro, similar Milan, but it's not really bam smack in the middle of the city. Yeah, those are the ones I'm going to go with.
This is BBC 5 Live, available on the BBC iPlayer radio app. Up all night with Dotun Adebayo.
Yeah, our phone number again, 08085 909 693. Talking football in Europe and South America with the Colonel Mina Rizuki, Legendino Tim Vickery, and we're talking about players from their regions playing in our leagues as well. General one for both of you. And this is I quite like this actually. What are the best performances on a player's debut that you've seen in either your regions? Carl wants to know. Mina, do you want to go first on that? Debut performances, the best ones, most memorable maybe.
Wayne Rooney for United?
Yeah, it wasn't a bad one, was it?
What was it? Did he score a hat-trick at the time? I think it was.
Did he score a hat-trick on his debut?
Yeah, I think it was on...
Wow.
I think it was. It was a Champions League game, and it was against Galatasaray or Fenerbahce, and I think he scored a hat-trick. And I remember thinking, because I wasn't so sure about him at the time, obviously. I seem to not be sure about very many people. But I remember thinking, I don't know. And then he just really announced himself. Actually, the other one that comes to my mind is my favorite player. I know that he remains an enigma, but my God, did he have bags of talents. Alvaro Recoba. For Inter Milan. Yeah. And I remember that because it was the season that they had just bought Ronaldo, and that was obviously, the standout player. Inter were going to finally challenge and really produce something special and sort of wrestle the mantelpiece of Juventus. And they bought, the biggest Brazilian player. But then Alvaro Recoba comes in. They were behind in a game against Brescia. And he just comes off the bench, scores 2, and just shows off his talent. And he was Massimo Moratti, that's sort of the president of Inter Milan's favourite player at the time. And he just came on, just so cool, calm, collected, scores 2, wins the match. And it was like, wow, welcome to Inter. Tim? That was probably my favourite.
What about Tim?
One that stands out for me because he's a player with so much talent is a fellow from Peru called Christopher Gonzalez. And 3 or 4 years ago, he made his international debut. He came off the bench. It was a friendly. I think it was against Trinidad and Tobago. He's up against Trinidad and Tobago. So that makes it even more remarkable. And he scored. He scored with his first touch in international football. His first touch. Wow. Throw on and beautifully clipped over the goalkeeper. Such a talented player. Now, what has happened to him? Absolutely nothing. And the big lesson here is that talent is never, ever enough. It's never enough on its own. I remember raving about him because he reminded me a little bit, and still a little bit of Paul Gascoigne. Just the way he would he can drop a shoulder. And I saw one of his very first games at club level for Universitario in Peru, and it's like, who on earth is this? This is, wow, this is fantastic. And I was raving about him. And then someone who had coached him got in touch with me and said, forget it. Don't bother about it. He doesn't want it enough. Yeah, he just doesn't want it enough. He's we were honoured him to try and but he's not prepared to pay the price. He's floated around. He's bounced around between football in Chile and Peru, and it's so frustrating. But this is, I think, this is such an important lesson that talent on its own is never enough. And the big, I suppose, the big example for me is
Lucas
the
Moura?
most naturally talented player that I've ever seen, which is Ronaldinho. And Ronaldinho has absurd talent. It's just absurd. And even today, in kind of exhibition matches, he can do things that other players, other world-class players couldn't even dream of doing. He is so absurdly naturally talented. But if you look at his career, he was a spent force at the age of 26. Because he discovered other things in life that he loved more than playing football. And in order to play football, you've got to get yourself in a physical condition that gives you a platform for your talent. So, talent on its own is never enough.
We all discover women at some point, don't we? Pauline Leeds, good morning. Well, not all of us, but you know what I mean. Pauline Leeds, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, man.
Well,
good to speak to you. Go ahead.
Okay, I've got a question about the Brazilian wonder kids of the future. And I'm thinking, we all loved seeing Ronaldo and Rivaldo growing up, Roberto Carlos, these great players. Well, I did anyway. I'm a bit younger than some of you, but
you're not younger than me. You're not younger than me.
I've heard a lot of things about the Vinicius Junior, and I've heard some people saying that he could be even better than Pelé. And I was just wondering what Tim's views on that are.
Don't do that to anyone. I remember going into the World Cup in 2006, the Brazilian media saying that about Ronaldinho. He's going to be better than Pelé. And you look back at that headline now and you just cry. Well, there's two, I think, to pick out. And both of them, you can see them soon in the World Under-17 Cup. Now, always take the World Under-17 Cup with a pinch of salt. It's so far away from the real deal, and sometimes success in the World Under-17 Cup can actually hold a player back. It makes him think he's too good too early. And Brazil's huge failure in the last few years in the Under-17 World Cup, when they couldn't buy a goal and they were eliminated, they were one of only 8 sides out of 24 eliminated in the first round, was in 2009 when the front two were Neymar and Felipe Coutinho. I wonder what happened to them. Their failure, their total failure at under-17 level wasn't an impediment to them going on to do great things. So if the two players I'm going to mention do great things in the coming World Under-17 Cup in India, don't read too much into it necessarily, but the talent is there. One, you mentioned, Vinicius Junior just scored his first goal this week against Palestino of Chile in the Copa Sudamericana. There is real talent there. I feel sorry for him with the move to Real Madrid because it's put him under a spotlight and an expectation that perhaps isn't fair. And I saw his professional debut for Flamengo. He came off the bench. The crowd were just baying for him because Real Madrid had just paid this absurd sum of money for him, but they can't take him until he's 18. So the crowd were baying for him. When the team line up to announce before the game, he got a bigger cheer than anyone else. As the game's going into the second half, the crowd, so they just kind of had to put him on the field in the end. He went through a repertoire of tricks, failed with more or less all of them. It looked a little bit embarrassing, like a kind of ball boy who's run onto the field and wants to show what he can do. But there is real talent there. Another one who got there first in terms of scoring goals is Paulinho. Paulinho is an attacking midfielder with Vasco da Gama who has already scored 2. He scored 2 in one game for Vasco a couple of weeks ago. And he looks to really have it as an attacking midfielder. Vinicius will play wide left, cutting in onto his right. Paulinho will play off the centre forward. Those two look like the players to follow in the World Under-17 Cup. And the talent is really, really there. You hope that all of the hype and the Real Madrid move, because Real Madrid spending the amount of money that they're spending on Vinicius Junior, it's a kind of... It makes no football sense, but it makes sense from a Real Madrid point of view. They are Real Madrid. They lost out on Neymar. They lost out on Gabriel Jesus. They ain't missing out on this one. They can afford to, if he doesn't come off, they can afford to blow the money. They're Real Madrid. But you wonder if it's the right thing to happen for the young man in question, who does seem very, very level-headed. And so I feel... a little bit sorry for him, and by contrast, very happy for Paulinho, who's been able to come up a little bit in the shadow of Vinicius Junior and has already done a little bit more and hasn't had all of the hype around him. But they're the two to watch. I hope it hasn't come all too soon for them.
What about in Europe, Mina?
Oh, sorry. What, upcoming talents?
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I I mean, upcoming or ones who have already sort of proved themselves, in the likes of Kylian Mbappe? Hello?
Yeah, we're still here. We're listening, yeah.
And so that's what I'm asking you, because I guess he's already proved himself.
Paul?
I would say...
Oh, well, actually, sorry, the only it was not a European one, but the other thing I was wondering about was a guy called Luan in Brazil, who he seems to me like a fantastic player, and Michael Newcastle are apparently sniffing around and close to a deal. And
for Luan?
Well,
I haven't seen that.
That's what I've heard.
I'm told that Liverpool, although Liverpool have denied it, although I see the sense in that. And Luan is already 24, so we ain't talking about a wonder kid there.
Right.
He's a lovely player, a little bit of a late developer, and it's taken him 3 years to really consolidate himself. But he's a lovely, lovely player. I love watching him, and he's one of those who's kind of support striker, plays behind the number 9, will float around, and he's so good and so clever at getting in the space between the lines. And he's one of those players who just makes football look so easy. He chooses his options very well. He's quite strong on the ball. He's got a terrific surprise shot with the little backlift, and he just plays the right passes. He's a very, very intelligent player. He's not the type of player that Brazilian football is producing in great quantity at the moment. They're producing lots of flyers, lots of attackers in wide spaces, but this kind of lucid, very clear-sighted, intelligent player who links the team together. Luan is more or less on his own with that. He's with Grêmio at the moment, who are a lovely side to watch, especially because of him. They've got another midfielder who I really like, a fellow called Arthur, who's got a little bit of the young Iniesta about him. He can play in 360 degrees, and he's definitely a name to watch. His passing is very accurate and dependable and intelligent. But with Luan, at the age of 24, I think Grêmio realise they're going to have to sell him soon. Where he's going to go, I don't know. And there's been talk of Arsenal being interested. Spartak Moscow are certainly interested. Today's news, it's a different story every day. Today's news is that it might be Sampdoria, but not until January, allowing him to stay at Grêmio until the end of the year and play the Libertadores, and if they win the Libertadores, play the World Club Cup as well. But whoever gets him, I think they won't regret it, because he's a very, very nice player to watch.
I've heard he was going to be the next Craig Bellamy, so I got quite excited about that.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not, because Bellamy was a flyer. Bellamy was a flyer.
Yeah.
A flyer. He's a little bit like, following the kind of Liverpool thing, a little bit like an improved version of Nigel Clough. I know Nigel Clough didn't really come off at Liverpool, but in comparison with Nigel Clough, Luan is physically stronger on the ball, but so good at getting in the space between the lines and playing from there.
Yeah, good enough for you, Paul?
Yeah, brilliant, absolutely sensational. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for the call. 08085 909 69.
So you don't want my answers anymore?
Well, we offered it to you, and then Paul said, "Look, I'm not bothered about what Mina's got to say." Did you not hear that? Did you not hear that?
You see, you could have had as many sips on your wine as you wanted there, on your Chianti or whatever.
You know what? I'm just going to go
Italian
back to
thing
my
you're
coffee,
drinking.
okay?
It's Chianti.
I was going to tell you all about the guys to watch out for.
Yeah, okay. Well, go on then, tell us anyway, and then I'll have a sip of that Chianti that Tim can't pronounce as Chianti.
Oh, we're getting all cosmopolitan now.
Indeed, we are. Indeed.
Look, he's really proving himself with the pronunciation today.
Exactly. So, yeah, go and tell us about the ones that are up and coming that you want to talk about, that Paul wasn't interested in.
Oh, really? You want me to talk about them now?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, then I'm going to talk about a young Czech player that was with Spartak Prague and then went to Sampdoria, and he's called Petr Schick. And he is going to be, I think, the next big striker to look out for. Although he did fail a medical, so we're not sure if, health-wise he's at the top level, because they spotted something to do with his heart, so I don't know. But he's so interesting in the sense that he's got an awkward body, but really knows how to use it quite well. His positioning is rather fantastic in the sense that he finds these little pockets next to all the fullbacks, and it kind of makes me think that if he was playing with Totti back in the day, he would have just been his growth would be amazing, because Totti always did that excellent diagonal pass to those areas. He really knows how to hold the ball,
bring
slip
Totti
away
back.
from defenders.
Bring him back.
No thanks. I don't know why Totti always comes up in every podcast I do. It's great.
I was thinking more bring Richard III back. Now's the winter of our discontent with the awkward body.
He can act as a classic centre. You know what? I just feel like we're not listening anymore.
No, we are. Who's not listening? Who's not listening? I am listening. I am. How would I have remembered what you just said? Of course we're listening. Go on. Finish your point, if you will. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble.
Okay. He's very good at picking up a pass. He's got excellent vision. He can play as a striker, or he can actually play next to the striker. He always knows how to sort of overcome the opponent, but not not by using necessarily physicality. He just creates space for himself and this unique ability. And he's so young, but he has this mental capability of scoring against the very best teams that he plays against. He doesn't feel the pressure. And I think that's a huge thing, because there are so many stars, and we were talking about that before, about there are so many excellent, talented players, but perhaps not there on a mental level. And they did this interview with Zinedine Zidane a while ago in the magazine, and they asked him, did you always know you were going to be a superstar? And he said, oh, God, no. I was probably the worst player in my sort of footballing school at the age of 13. He goes, I looked around and everyone was better and more physical and more intelligent and really knew where to position themselves. But the only difference was that I really, really wanted it, and I really was going to work and do my hardest to get there. And I was strong enough to live with the criticism. And I think that makes the difference. And when you see a youngster who can do that, and this is what I love about the likes of Kylian Mbappe, and perhaps what I don't like so much about Paulo Dybala, even though I think that he's got all the talent in the world, but definitely he's one to look out for. And I would say another one, again, sorry, I am kind of referring to Serie A in all of this, is Caldara, Matteo Caldara, who's an excellent centre-back, and a little bit in the form of Sergio Ramos, in which he has this excellent aerial ability. So he was one of the top scorers at the time for Atalanta, really positions himself well in a way that a centre-back doesn't necessarily always do. I feel like, most of the time, even the great ones like Kompany at Manchester City, you find them always having to put in a tackle when they don't actually need to do that so much had they positioned themselves well. They can always just intercept the ball, take it, and move forward, in this sort of elegant way. And Caldara is that kind of defender, one who really doesn't need to ever jump into a challenge or have to panic in anything and pull off a tackle. He just coolly and calmly takes the ball, goes forward, and sometimes even scores in himself. Another one to look out for. That's it. Hello?
You sent it to sleep, I think.
Sorry.
Did you guys sleep? Really? I mean...
No, sorry. Sorry,
we're never
Mina.
meeting, Tim. Okay, we're never meeting.
Yeah. Sorry, Mina.
Well, no, it's not my fault. Hang on. I'm coming to your defence here, because I'm not going to let you let him bully you. Yeah. And because I was hanging on every word, I want to ask you a couple of questions. They're kind of Serie A based, but it's about the Argentina squad, which has just been announced.
Are you still talking, Vickery? Did you not allow Mina Rzouki to finish her point?
No, I'm going to bully her as well if I'm not allowed to ask my question.
What about that Icardi got chosen and Higuain wasn't?
Hang on, look,
hello.
Just hold
yes.
your question for one moment, please, Tim, because Sandeep in Ilkley has been listening very intently to everything Mina's been saying, haven't you, Sandeep?
Well, I have to admit, I just fell asleep there a minute.
Oh, no.
Hang on, has anybody heard a single word that Mina has said tonight? No?
This is why people get divorced these days. There's just no men that listen anymore. No, not even when you're talking football.
We've heard every single word. We've heard every single word. We've heard every single word you've said.
No,
anyway,
I understand if I'm asking you guys to take the rubbish out, but really, even when a woman chats football, you're not listening anymore. Like,
I've heard every single word you said. Trust me. And if
what was that bit about the rubbish? I think I didn't hear that.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash.
Oh, Aguero had a great debut. I forgot about him. Sorry, nothing. Yeah.
No, that's all right. Sandeep, so welcome to the World Football Phone-In. And, you got a question for Mina.
Oh, you certainly do. After insulting her there, are
you sure you care to listen to the answer?
Her superior knowledge. So I'm interested in France specifically. So I saw this week that Nice were linked with Jerome Boateng. That on TalkSport, the world's biggest radio station, and I just wanted to know. They're obviously they've got Balotelli, they've got Dante, might have Boateng. Is there something big that's brewing on the south coast of France?
First, did you want to take back your comments about the world's biggest radio station?
I don't know what you mean.
Is something brewing? Do they have a plan? No, I just think that a lot of people probably want to play for Lucien Favre. I think he's probably one of the best and most underrated coaches ever. And they do have a very good chance, although they are facing Napoli when it comes to the Champions League preliminaries, so that could be difficult. I'll be honest, I actually haven't heard them with Jerome Boateng. So I don't know whether that was just a rumor that they started at the time to make themselves perhaps look bigger. But they didn't they just sign Wesley Sneijder as well?
Yeah, they did. He's there as well. So
that was because Ranieri came out and was talking about the fact that he's not a player that they were looking for in Nantes. I don't know why. I feel like Sneijder is a perfect player for any team. But they do have an interesting project. They do have a bigger budget, let's say, than certain other teams in Ligue 1, although not as obviously as a big comparison to PSG. They do want to make a run of it. If they do manage to beat Napoli, then they want to make an impression, because France really does want to prove itself on the Champions League stage. They have some interesting players to look at. And Favre is amazing at getting the best out of his team, and he really works with the sporting director closely to try to achieve balance on a tactical level. So he's been talking about the players that he needs to create, special. He gives players debuts as well as having the likes of Balotelli to rely on, and other big players like Wesley Sneijder who can bring in the experience. But also at the same time, there's a lot of youngsters that he can bleed, that can go forward and become a powerhouse. Actually, what was interesting was there was another question that was being asked about a player called Sarri, their playmaker as well. And people were wondering, whether he's better or Coutinho, I think was the question, as to whether you'd rather get Sarri or Coutinho. And he's another wonderful playmaker, one that you can really look at. I guess, when you have a coach like Lucien Favre, then you always have a chance of making something special. I don't know of anything huge that they're building, but again, France is not really a league that I tend to follow too closely.
Yeah, sort of following on from that as well, I saw the French Super Cup the other week between PSG and Monaco, and bearing in mind that sort of Monaco seems to be the in team at the minute, sort of doing well in the Champions League last season, and they've got all these great young players, but they were completely outclassed by PSG. Do you think that anyone can catch PSG in France this season?
Well, considering now that they've got Neymar, and they do have really quite an excellent team, and all remains to be seen whether or not they do actually get Mbappe, which is, we're talking about a lot, like $500,000 being spent on two players practically, then they would be a force to be reckoned with, because they've really weakened Monaco as well. Monaco, what they have on their side is, ever since they sort of changed, they were a side that spent a lot of money at the time. If you remember, they brought in James Rodriguez and they brought in Falcao. And at the time, the president really wanted to create a team that can rival PSG and be interesting to look at. Then they had to change tack. He didn't have the money to spend on the club anymore. And they had a great versatile coach in Khadim, a coach who at the time was awfully criticized by the media in France for being purely defensive, someone who played really like sort of park the bus type of tactics, someone who belonged in the 1950s of Serie A, sort of that type of coach who really didn't understand how to bring the best out of his players going forward. Lo and behold, you gave him a team that had a lot of attacking potential, and he created a side that just scored an abundance of goals last season, proving how tactically versatile and how excellent he is at talking to youth. Honestly, he is one of the most underrated coaches, because his ability to work with the players that he has. And so sometimes it's like, they've got to be boring tactics, because sadly I don't have the luxury players to make this an entertaining, football team. But last season he did. He had many good youngsters, excellent fullbacks and the likes of Mendy. He had, wide players like Lemar. He had, everyone was pitching in to score the goals. And then, of course, that's why it was an exciting side to watch. But they have been somewhat cannibalized. They've had to sell off. They're not a side that can really afford to say no to big money. So it will be up to Khadim to yet again look at what he has, try to build it again, find the right tactical balance, bring in new players, put them through to the first team and try to patch up what they've left off. But Unai Emery is an excellent coach, and perhaps in his second season, I know he came under a lot of criticism for his loss against Barcelona. But again, a very good coach, and I think that it's just impossible to compete with that kind of money.
Sandeep, thanks a lot for the call. 08085 909 693. The number to call if you'd like to join in this morning's World Football Phone in Europe and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. You will not believe the amount of people who actually think that I wasn't listening to you earlier, Mina. Gosh, even my own colleagues think that I fell asleep whilst you were talking. It's not true. It's not true. I mean,
well, I don't know. I mean, if people are thinking that, they're working with you, Dotun.
No, they're not. They're not working with me. You and Tim are, though, this morning, and it's always a pleasure to have you, and less of a pleasure to have Tim. Of course it is, yeah. However, we're talking football in Europe and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. 08085 909 693. If you'd like to join in the conversation as well. Lots to get through. Let's crack through a couple of these. Damon said this, which I thought was quite interesting. Which position do either of you think makes the best manager? Which position, whilst the managers were playing professional football, make the best managers? Is it, a former midfielder, former striker, defender, goalkeeper, that kind of thing? Midfielder is what you'd go for, Mina. Any example, maybe?
Yeah, let's see. Fabio Capello, who is my favourite coach of all time. Then there's Carlo Ancelotti, Cholo Simeone, Antonio Conte, Pep Guardiola. They're all midfielders. I feel like it's a position, especially, where you can sort of see the pitch, where you're asked to do a little bit of both. There's a duality to the role. It's also sort of the thinking position, the position where you're required to, not necessarily, like a forward can sometimes heavily rely on their instincts more than anything else. And at defense, you're so concentrated on blocking things that perhaps you can't see how to open up or where the spaces are. And I feel like a midfielder has to do a little bit of everything, which is why he's the most complete player, the hardest player, the most expensive player to buy, especially a very good one. So for me, it's always that one, midfielder.
And Tim?
Go along with that 100%. In fact, I mean, one of the greats, the real greats, just turned 86 this week, Mario Zagallo, who was a player for Brazil when they won the World Cup in 58 and 62, and the coach in 70. And he was exactly that. And he was a left winger as I think someone in France said, he taught the world that a player has two shirts, one as an attacker and one as a defender. Because he was a left winger. And when Brazil brought in the back four, if you still keep wingers, that means there's a huge hole in the midfield. And realising that, he would funnel back and help in midfield. He did it in 58. The coach in 62 didn't want him to do it, and he did it anyway, and Brazil wouldn't have won the World Cup had he not done it. And then in 70, on his team, and that team in 1970, they're real pioneers of 4-2-3-1 or 4-5-1. The central idea was, when we lose the ball, everyone by the centre forward comes behind the line of the ball. It really is modern football. And so Zagallo, as a midfielder himself, the art of being a coach, I think, is finding, in accordance with the talent available to you, you always have to find a balance between attack and defence. Zagallo, as a midfielder, was one of the players I think was most able to do that as a manager.
Having said that, sorry, you go on, Mina.
I was going to say there are obviously exceptions to the rule.
I was about to come to Alex Ferguson. Arrigo.
Alex Ferguson, yeah. Arrigo Sacchi was a defender, not a midfielder.
Alf Ramsey was a right back, wasn't he? Alf Ramsey, as I recall.
Yeah,
that's right.
Tele Santana, one of my favourites, and I feel like the inspiration behind Guardiola was a goalkeeper, and then he became a centre forward. So, Zoff, I used to love.
No, Tele Santana was a winger.
What? Didn't he start off his career as a goalkeeper? I'm fairly certain I read this somewhere.
Yeah. No, he couldn't be. He's tiny. I mean,
I remember
he's called like his nickname is the String of Hope, because he was.
I'm going to find this for you.
He was another one exactly like Zagallo, exactly the same kind of thing. A winger who would funnel back and make the extra man in midfield.
And, of course, he had a black magic woman as well.
I think it was on BBC Sport. 1 second. Fair play. I'd rather lose the game. I'm going to find this because I'm fairly certain he started as a goalkeeper.
Got Edward in Leeds with us. Good morning, Edward.
Hi, Dotton. Hi, Tim and Nina. I was wanting to, just following on from the questions about...
Second quarter from Leeds tonight, though. Second quarter from Leeds. I'm really impressed, Edward, Yeah, I was just wanting to find out whether there was the equivalent of ground hopping in your respective regions, and whether I know in England we're lucky enough to have the 92 clubs, and you can join the 92 club if you've been to all the stadiums. I was just wondering whether you were lucky enough to have that with a similar depth of clubs. Ground hopping in South America, Tim?
Sorry, what is...
Not really.
I don't know whether I'm...
Ground hopping is visiting all the stadiums, going around and visiting, crossing them all off a list.
It's a challenge, or...
Yeah, personal challenge.
As a kind of hobby. Like, instead of stamp collecting, you're kind of collecting the experience of going to different football grounds.
Train spotting. I'd have gone for train spotting rather than stamp collecting. Yeah. Stamp collecting is
it's a very male thing, I think, hence Mina's confusion.
No, and then I meant, do you do it in one day, or do you
No,
in 1 hour?
Not in one day. No. In a lifetime, if you're lucky.
So it's a very male phenomenon, and also I think it's a very British phenomenon. It's or perhaps German as well. I've come across German or Northern Europeans who also do it. It's not particularly common here. I've really seen this during past versions of the Copa America. There'll be some English ground hoppers who use the most dodgy accreditation to get accredited for the Copa America, and they'll come across, and all they're doing is visiting the grounds. One of them was he was always accredited to it was the Aldershot Register, or whatever the paper was from Aldershot. He got them to accredit him. He wasn't writing anything at all. He was just visiting all the grounds. But it was only the English who seemed to do it.
So now you've decided to grass him up. The guy might still be on his journey. You've grassed him up now.
Yeah, I don't think he's done it for a while, and I think they've tightened a little bit the criteria for giving credentials away.
It's interesting that, Mina, as Tim was saying, Mina, that it's a very male-oriented thing. I suppose women don't flick bogeys and stuff like that at each other either. There's a lot of things that men do that women don't do.
I hope not. But this is the thing. It
is like that, though, isn't it, Edward? Ground hopping. This is a similar thing.
I don't think it's the same as flipping a bogey.
Well, okay, maybe not quite. Do they do it in Europe at all? Have you heard of this, Mina?
Sorry, I didn't even know what it was. So I'm assuming if you were going to do it, you'd probably do it in a city that has like tons of stadium around. I'd probably do it in Madrid, if I'm honest, just because I'd like to see all those Madrid, sides, but I don't know how often. I'm sorry, I really don't know anything about that.
Oh, and why are you interested in this question, Edward, out of interest?
I went to Forest Green Rovers on Saturday to recomplete my 92.
Wow.
They were a new team that just joined the league.
Congratulations.
And then,
how long did it take you?
To go to? It was about 3 hours from where I live. But last season I did a challenge where I went to watch every team in the league play a home match in the shortest amount of time. Which was 189 days, and I got a Guinness Book of Records certificate.
Yeah, but you didn't do it to get into the Guinness Book of Records, though, did you? Why did you do it?
I did it because I just turned 50, and I took a sabbatical from work. And it was just
crisis.
A lovely thing to do. Just so many nice people I met, raising money for charity, that sort of thing.
But midlife crisis.
Well, I hope my husband has that kind of midlife crisis than a young girl in a Ferrari. So.
Yeah.
Hey, hang on a minute, husband. That's new to us, isn't it?
Don't worry about.
There we go, Tim. You don't know everything, do you?
No, no. See, we weren't with Dotton. We weren't invited to the wedding, were we?
No.
I'm saying my husband as in future wives, not that I have one.
Okay. Tim, for goodness sake, can we stick to the football? Anyway, Edward,
it is a true story. Some of my closest friends didn't.
Go on.
A couple of my closest friends didn't invite me to their wedding. They only invited me to the reception afterwards because they were so scared of that moment when, he says, can anyone here think of any reason that these people shouldn't get married? Speak now. They were really scared that I was going to say it because just before they got together, she had said about him, I would go out with him if he was taller. And, so...
And now you're wondering why you weren't invited.
Back to the football, Edward. Which is the best stadium of the 92 for you?
For me, it was probably Spurs, to be honest. I went to watch Spurs Chelsea,
the old one?
on the 4th of January.
The old one? The one that's been pulled down?
With him all the way on that one.
Yeah. It was a really great atmosphere against Chelsea. It was packed out, both sets of fans singing and stuff. Really good game.
What's your favourite stadium ever?
Me? It's a baseball ground. I'm a Derby fan, and that's where where I used to go and watch Derby play.
Okay.
And Tim, have you got questions from him about grounds? Edward knows he's our expert for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you like White Hart Lane so much. I've got a Brazilian mate who's an Anglophile, and he comes across to London once a year, and he's always been a West Ham fan. But the last time he was over in February, he went to Crystal Palace, and he's now become Crystal Palace. He said, the atmosphere was absolutely fantastic, so he's become a Palace fan. Now, I've got mates who are Palace fans, and they'll say, it's the worst, in kind of technical terms, it's probably the worst stadium in the Premier League. But it comes out with this atmosphere. So my question to Edward is, do you think modern stadiums are bad for atmosphere?
Yeah, I do. I think you can make them too big. Arsenal was a real disappointment for me, and I worry that Spurs, if the stadium gets too big for them, I know it might sound a bit weird, but if you get too big, you lose it, don't you? And I've recently started going to Scottish grounds as well, and it's just lovely to go back to the equivalent without just being disparaging. They've not moved on as much, and it's lovely to see the old stadiums there and feel some more warmth from them, I think.
If I could just say something about the Arsenal, and a lot of Gooners may not agree with me about this, but I went to the old stadium from when I was a kid. The first two stadiums I ever went to were White Hart Lane and the Old Highbury. Yeah. And with the Old Highbury, the majority of the people there, North Bank and all of that, the majority of the people there were hardcore fans. Now, with the new stadium, it seems like the majority of the people are, what we would have called tourists back in the old days, not necessarily from overseas, but even the sort of London gooners, tourist gooners. And I think they don't contribute to the atmosphere. I don't think it's about the size of the stadium. I think it's about the quality, for want of a better word, of the fans. Yeah, that you'll get the equivalent of the ultras, if you like, who are making all the noise. And then the other 60-70% aren't making noise, then there's no atmosphere.
But architecture matters, though. I mean, this really came across to me on Saturday at Wembley, because it was very, very quiet, really quiet. And one thing is, it just doesn't feel like home.
Well, it's not, is it?
No. But the people, the people who usually sing together and create the atmosphere, they're now dispersed. And this is one thing that makes Palace so good, and that they've worked really hard to create this one area behind the goal where there's a real group of singing fans, and they get going, and they'll raise it all up. They'll raise the ante across the stadium.
What about Wembley on a cup day? You see, on a cup day, the atmosphere is there, despite the fact that it's not people's grounds. I don't think it's the architecture with Wembley. I think it's the fact that people are being asked to come and watch ordinary league football in a stadium that they know they go to for special occasions. It's strange.
Maybe the panoramic view of northwest London is not inspirational.
Yeah, you've mentioned that a couple of times already, I see.
I don't know if it's the stadium. I mean, in Italy, we have obviously Inter and Milan shared a stadium, and the San Siro is amazing in terms of acoustics, but Milan always had like a group of ultras at the time called Fossa di Leone, and they used to just make that the most... It was like a cauldron, you felt and you heard everything. It vibrated from the bottom up. If you put your foot down on the floor, it would start shaking. Cameras could never capture a still shot because of how much the stadium would shake with these fans, and how much they yelled and sang and cheered from beginning to end. And they really gave it an atmosphere that made Milan such a hard team to play, and especially when it came to Champions League, which is why they are the second most successful side. Whereas Inter, despite playing in the same stadium, never really had a group of fans that could do the same thing. So I don't know whether it's necessarily that, or whether what your fans or what you can create. And obviously Fossa di Leone broke up and they don't really have that anymore. But I don't know how much that also makes a difference
because
to where you're from and what you can afford.
Yeah, I think Mina makes a valid point, actually. And I don't know, Edward, if you've been to smaller stadiums where it's more definitive about what the fans contribute to it, tiny little stadiums, for example.
Yeah, that's the Scottish ones I just draw on. I went to watch Morton against St Mirren, which sounds really small, but it's a local derby. There's probably about 7,000 or 8,000 people there, and it was really, really great. Great atmosphere towards the end of last season. I think the ground can be too big, and it dilutes. The passionate fans are there, but if there's too many other fans or too much space, it dilutes it a bit.
You still see in some of those lower league stadiums where fans can stand up at one section of the ground. Did you still see that one or two places?
Yeah, there's quite a few of them around. Yeah, I mean, Burton was one, which they're in the Championship now, and the first one I went to was Bristol Rovers. That was really great as well. They'd just been promoted to Division 1 at the time, and to experience that passion was great. I felt it was getting really behind the team, so that made a real difference.
What about grounds?
Edward, where would you stand on the safe standing issue for the Premier League?
I definitely want safe standing.
Yeah.
Definitely want it, but with it being safe, I remember being nearly crushed a few times when I was little, and I wouldn't want that. But I'd much prefer to have safe standing now.
In terms of a conversation we had earlier on in the programme about stadiums where you can see the whole match from the neighbouring tower blocks, any that you'd recommend?
I haven't actually done that myself. I've always paid in, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking if you'd been at a stadium and looked around you and thought, gosh, I wish I had a flat over there.
Well, Orient's got that, hasn't it? And Southend as well. There's flats that overlook the stadium. We didn't know whether they made them more expensive or more cheap.
Yeah, in the old days. And just out of interest, where's the best place to sit in ground for you, who's been to so many? Is it behind the goals? Is it on the wings, or what?
When I was little, I always used to go on the halfway line with my dad and be in the League Stand at Derby. So that was probably where I've always go back to if I had the choice. That sort of halfway point to see both ends equivalent. I think standing at the end, you end up seeing one end really, really well and the other end not as well. So I've always been probably a halfway person.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Really appreciate the call. Edward in Leeds there calls up the programme, then becomes a pundit. Didn't do a bad job.
Then we're asking questions.
Well, I didn't do a bad job, did he?
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure, of course you can.
One thing, just replying to Tim. So he did start off as a goalkeeper, but he played his professional life as a winger.
We're talking about Telly Santana. Yeah, his entire professional life, professional career is a winger. I've never heard any record of him ever playing as a goalkeeper.
Yeah, you're the same age. You had to stick that one in, didn't she? Got it in very swiftly, though. No, it was a winger's pass. It was a winger's pass.
But my point is that he started as a goalkeeper, okay? That's what I wanted to say.
Well done, Mina. Yeah,
that's why people get divorced,
Yeah, although you wouldn't know anything about that.
What are you talking about? There are loads of men who do have 15-year-old girlfriends. Then we take it to Milan.
Well, not sure about that. Anyway, this Mina and Tim, both of you live in predominantly Catholic countries. Do you know of any priests who have played the game at a high level in either, or even at a lower level? But the listener here says at a high level. I don't know, Mina. Do you want to suggest something?
Priests who played the game.
Yeah, or anybody in the church, maybe.
I mean, the only thing that I can honestly link to a priest at the top of my head has got to be Galliani, who was the CEO of AC Milan under Silvio Berlusconi before they sold it off to the Chinese, was married to a woman who allegedly ran off and became a nun, because of the impact that he had on her, because she wasn't quite sure what kind of... I mean, she basically had her reservations about her husband and decided to run off and become a nun. But that's about as close as I can give you to being a priest or anything to do with that.
And are there footballers who've gone to take the cloth later on after playing?
Wait, there is one. Give me a moment.
Yeah, no problem. I'll give you a moment, because I was thinking of Gavin Peacock over here, Tim, and Richard Rufus, Charlton player, as well, and your man, was it Cyril? Nice one, Cyril. What's his name? Did he?
His brother. His brother was Peter Knowles, who was playing for Wolves, and he gave it up to take on some kind of religious order.
Yeah,
certainly in Brazil, there's loads of ex-players who become, but usually it's not Catholics. It's usually the Pentecostal evangelical religions, evangelical Protestant religions, which have made such progress here in the last 50 years. And you find, especially in the working class areas in the peripheries, you find lots and lots of evangelical churches and very little profile from the Catholic Church. And that I think, and
of interest, why is that
Catholic Church,
economic thing?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with that. I mean, the Catholic Church, it's always been associated more with the rich here in South America. It lined itself up with the right wing during the years of the military dictatorship. Although there were inside the Catholic Church, there were kind of left-connected movements. The Polish Pope really put the screw on them. You know, he really turned it politically very right-wing, and he almost kind of got blamed, I think, for the decline of Catholicism in Latin America. And that's one of the reasons that the current Pope is South American. You know, he's from Argentina. It was an attempt by the Catholic Church to try and win back territory that they've lost to the Protestants in one of the areas that they consider its heartland in South America. Which brings me, I can't think of players who were also priests or whatever, but the current Pope is an absolute football fanatic. He's a fanatic for San Lorenzo. Now, San Lorenzo is a club, Buenos Aires club, that has a long tradition of kind of church involvement, and one of the nicknames of San Lorenzo is the Crows, and the Crows, because you know the bird, the crow, is like black and with a white little thing. It looks like a kind of priest. So there's always been a strong connection. And when he wasn't Pope Francis, when he was Cardinal Bergoglio, he used to go down in the dressing room, you know, before the games, and he's an absolute fanatic. He's a paid-up club member, and there was one coach who years and years and years ago, you know, this priest would come down in the dressing room before the game or something, and this coach, he threw him out. You know, I'm not having this. I'm not having a priest come down in the dressing room before. And then, you know, you fast forward 20 years, and Cardinal Bergoglio becomes Pope Francis, and this Argentine manager who was coach of San Lorenzo, he looks, my God, you know that fella I used to throw out the dressing room? He's the Pope. I'm going to hell.
Anyway, hold your thought, by the way, Mina. I know you want to come back, but I know Amin's been waiting patiently for a minute or two. Amin in London, good morning.
No, I can't. I really can't think of him. Sorry, go on.
Okay, no problem. Amin, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hiya.
Morning.
Got a couple of questions for Mina and Tim. Firstly, for Tim, I was on the internet today, and I was reading somewhere that Paulinho, ex-Spurs midfielder, he's been linked to Barcelona. I think he's in quite good vein of form in China. So I just wanted to know what you think of that rumour, and if there's any likelihood in that. Second, for Mina, the question is regarding Man City. I know Mina is famously a big fan of defensive football, and good defensive football, may I add.
Yes,
and
yes, so you may add that, yes.
So I wanted to know, Man City, Pep Guardiola spending roughly £130 million on 3 new defenders, what she thinks on their chances for this season, and whether those 3 defenders are the ones to tighten up the ship and allow them to, I don't know, win things and win titles, I suppose.
Mina, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I would have to say that I'm quite surprised by how many people have picked Man City to be the team that they think will win the Premier League. When I ask people, they say it's based on the players that they've brought in. But they're the only side that haven't necessarily strengthened the spine, but really from outside, which is weird because when you're trying to build a team to win, you usually strengthen through your spine. You know, you bring a centre back, or you bring in a great midfielder who's going to release everyone up forward, and the striker that's going to score all your goals. But instead, they've just gone in the wide areas and decided to buy 3 fullbacks for an astonishing amount, and then a goalkeeper. The thing is what worries me about them is that, for me, none of them, obviously perhaps other than Mendy, are really, and again, even with Mendy, they're not players who've been consistently good at a high level for many years that I would tell you, you know what, instead, as well as talent, they bring an experience and a staunch winning mentality, and they understand what it means to play at the very best level and take Manchester City up that notch. Kyle Walker, again, very good attacking-wise, but really, is he the best or your first choice when it comes to the duality of the role? Can he really cover and provide that defensive caution that you need sometimes, especially when you're playing for Manchester City and Guardiola's tactics? And then you look at, Benjamin Mendy. I would say that, he was probably the guy who had the best season last year, and terrific for Monaco, played under a coach who really does understand defensive organisation. But really, again, I'm not sure that you can say he had many years of playing at the top level and won several things to provide that kind of mentality. And Danilo was notorious for really living up to expectations at Real Madrid. I mean, he barely played. When he did, he came under heavy criticism. You can see he's got a lot of talent there, but on the sense of mentality, he really didn't have it. And he really couldn't cope with the pressure of playing for Real Madrid and sadly, or displacing anyone else. So he was kind of just a bench player. So that worries me. More than anything, though, and I'm going to be honest here, I think they have a great squad, especially now that, Gundogan back from injury. Their front line is just amazing to look at. But even if they bought the best defenders in the world and they actually had, starting centre-backs that work well together, and perhaps Kompany, who's always, alive and kicking and not injured and consistently available, I'm not entirely sure that Guardiola is very good at organising a solid defence. Now, looking, he had, Carlos Puyol at Barcelona, and when you have him, it sort of doesn't really matter who you play him alongside because he was such a terrific centre-back. Picked in Piqué, they made an excellent partnership. But again, Barcelona had so many talented players and was so effective at keeping the ball that defence almost became, irrelevant at the time. Moved to Bayern Munich, and he had the likes of Philipp Lahm, Alaba, Jerome Boateng, and they conceded 10 goals in the Champions League stage against Real Madrid and Barcelona, and then Atletico Madrid, again, they lost out to them. Didn't do anything in that level, looked poor defensively. Even when they played Arsenal and they won, they were scared every time a player ran at them. And I just worried about their defensive abilities under Guardiola. And back then, and I could honestly look at that back line at Bayern Munich and say it's one of the best I've ever seen. So I'm quite surprised that they had defensive qualities. So I'm not even sure, even if Manchester City did buy the best centre-backs in the world, had the best full-backs, whether or not they're just going to be a side that always know how to attack, but perhaps when they lose possession are going to be sliced open quite easily. None of those players that they've brought in, for me, are very good when it comes to defending, properly and or producing the pressure that allows the forwards to really unleash. All of them are very good at being direct. All of them can carry the ball forward, which is perhaps something that Guardiola realised from last season was something he needed to pick up on in the Premier League. You really need to get that ball moving quickly. His choice in goalkeeper is, again, a man who delivers that straight ball. But for me, defensive caution, I'm not sure it's there.
Well, that's the reason why Kyle Walker's in that mix. He's the only one that really has experience of the Premier League, and that was crucial. He may not be the best fullback or winger in the world.
They're all three of them are good players, but again, better players going forward than they are perhaps at providing that defensive ability and securing the defence.
We'll come back to the second part of your question in a moment or two, Amin.
Can I? Yeah. The Manchester, can you just help me out with his name? The Manchester United guy, the Irish one, former midfielder, became a priest, didn't he? Philip. I can't pronounce his surname.
Who are you thinking of? Irishman, Manchester United? Hang on.
A long time ago. But he was recently in the news,
because
literally last month or something.
Because Lisa McCormick is Irish. Lisa McCormick, you're Irish, aren't you?
You're like my mum. She thinks we all keep tabs on each other when we move away.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
By the way, they do the same thing with me. Oh, but you know that Italian guy there?
It's
like, nope.
Exactly.
It was
Nigerian. Last month. It was last month, and they had they uploaded his video of him being. It was. I don't know why I thought he was Italian for a second, but it was Irish. They were uploading him the video of him being ordained.
I really want to know now. I really want to know now.
Know that.
I don't.
Because it was an Irishman, and they were uploading his video last week. You must know who it is.
Google it.
Please do, because I want to know as well.
It's like when I used to go to New York, and they'd find out that I was from London. Literally, this Jewish guy goes, "You're from London? Do you know so?" That's a true story.
Crazy, isn't it?
I'm sure he was United, but I'm not good with Irish names. No, 1 second.
Listen, you talk about Philip Mulray.
Mulray.
Yes,
Mulray.
that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Did he become a deacon?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, and I'm Irish, as you can hear, so I would know all of that. 08085 909 693. We'll talk football for the last 25 minutes. If we can.
Sorry.
No. You have every right. You have every right to go elsewhere.
I think we've broken a record.
I have said, if we can, we'll talk football. If not, we'll talk whatever else is on the agenda.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. Up all night with Dotun Adebayo.
You still have time to join us in the fun and games for this first World Football phone-in of the season. The first, and already Mina Rzouki has earned herself a yellow card. First coming together of the season, she's earned a yellow card already.
Why? What did I do?
I thought you might be getting out a second yellow card for delaying the news by a record 5-6 minutes.
No, I wouldn't do that. But for sipping a glass of wine whilst we're trying to talk to whatever it was, whilst a listener wants to talk to you, well, that deserves a yellow card. And we're totting them up this season, so I wouldn't get to 5 if I were you. Please don't get to 5 because we need you.
What happens if I get to 5? And you're going to throw me out?
No. If you get up to 5, I leave the studio.
So are you trying to say that you can get away without listening to me? Yeah? And you don't get
I listened to every word. I was only pretending not to listen to you. And also, who ever heard of a referee getting a yellow card? Come on now, Mina. That's not how this game works. Anyway, as Amin, our last caller, was asking about Paulinho, Tim, can you enlighten us as to...
Yeah, first, just to endorse what Mina was saying about Man City and the areas that they haven't strengthened and the pressure that puts on the goalkeeper that they've bought, Ederson. They spent a lot of money on him. Very promising goalkeeper. There's something of a kind of Brazilian Manuel Neuer there. But you just worry. It's a big season for him because he could end up Brazil's World Cup goalkeeper. And the first choice, Alisson, isn't getting a game at Roma. So there is a chance for him, but it could go wrong. And I was a little bit alarmed to find out just in the week that he doesn't speak English yet. Guardiola said this. That's a worry because a goalkeeper has to be able to communicate with his defence. So you've got a defence with a question mark against that defence, and now a question mark against the communication within that defence, and it's a pressure position after what happened with Guardiola bringing in Claudio Bravo that last year, and that didn't really work. So that's going to be very interesting. But on Paulinho, I want to ping this one back.
1 year at the top.
Indeed, yeah. Indeed. So I want to ping Paulinho back to Mina in a minute. The speculation of this has been rumbling on for quite a while yet, with Barcelona interested in Paulinho. And Barcelona, you look at the squad and it does look thin in those midfield areas. Now, I don't know about his form with China, but he's been doing wonders for Brazil, Paulinho, and he's been scoring goals. He scored a hat-trick away to Uruguay when Brazil went behind early. He's got a really cracking hat-trick, and he's been not only scoring goals, but he's been making them as well and contributing nicely to the midfield marking. He's got a coach there with Brazil who knows him, who worked with him at Corinthians, knows exactly what he can do and what you want him to do, and he's part of the midfield block, but he's so good bombing into the opposing penalty area. That's what he does so well, the timing of the run, getting inside the opposing penalty area. What he doesn't do very well is pass. He's not a great passing midfielder, and given the fact that the Barcelona style is built around passing of the ball, my question for Mina is, do you think that he has much to bring to the table at Barcelona?
No, I'll be honest, I don't think so, because that's exactly... Look, I would have said to you that perhaps I can see this happening more had they stayed under Luis Enrique, who prefers a more direct style of football. But under Valverde, where they're trying to bring back that ability to maintain possession and actually unlock defenses a little bit more to, the way it was under Guardiola, I don't think for me that this makes sense. I don't think this is the guy that they should necessarily be going for. Again, 29, he's 29 or 30 years old. And it's exactly that. He has many weaknesses to his game, despite the fact that he has really proved himself in the last few seasons. But he was at his peak, and I can't see it really being a guy who brings that much to the table now.
Didn't work for him at Tottenham, did it? Why not?
No, well, it's been 2 times now in Europe, but he went to Poland earlier and really hated it and didn't enjoy Tottenham. And with the age as well, and maybe you could see him as a kind of reserve for Rakitic, giving him that dynamism. But, you know, at this age, he's not suddenly going to become a great passer of the ball. And the easiest way to destroy someone is to ask them to do something that they're not able to do. And the reason for his success over the last 12 months with Brazil is he's got a coach who knows him so well, gives him confidence, knows what he can do, knows what he can't do. And that would be my worry about Barcelona, that he'd be asked to do what he can't do.
Speak to Patrick in Watford. Oh, sorry, Mina, just bear with us 1 second, Patrick.
Sure. No, I was just going to say that the same newspaper that identified Paulinho at the time, Sport, as being the guy that they were looking at, also identified Jean Serre, the guy in Nice, who for me would be a much better option to go for than Paulinho.
Hello, Patrick.
Hello there.
Hi, mate.
Hello there. I've got a question for Tim, so Mina can have some time off and more wine if she wants it. Although I could come up with a question, really, in some ways, in regards of the wine.
Yeah. Well, why not come up with a sub-question? We'll wait for the sub-one in a second. But, yeah, go ahead with the one for Tim first.
The main one for Tim is Watford have signed a player called Richarlison. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's an under-20 Brazil international, and he's gained a work permit immediately. So I assume, therefore, he must be going into the first team, or at least into the first team squad with a view to play. Because obviously to get a permit without an EU passport, he has to be a player they're looking to use straight away. But is he going to be a rough diamond? Is he going to be first team regular? Is he going to set the world light? Or maybe a bit of everything, all the above, work in progress?
Well, when they first signed him or had the intention to sign him, I thought, well, I can't see why he's going to get a work permit. Some kindly soul sent me the criteria, the box-ticking criteria, because he doesn't have an EU passport. Milan were interested in him, actually, and the thing that put them off was that he doesn't have a passport. And I think they've already got their bases loaded with non-European community players. But he ticks enough boxes, I've now come to understand, because of the amount of wages that they're paying for him and the transfer fee and the fact that he comes from Brazil. Because Watford were denied a work permit for the Venezuelan Peñaranda, who was one of the stars of the World Under-20 Cup. Richarlison, as you mentioned, played for Brazil at under-20 level, but he played in a Brazil side that couldn't even qualify for the World Under-20 Cup. So there is an incoherence there, perhaps. What kind of player is he? He's a player of the type that Brazil is producing in large quantities at the moment, which is a striker in wide spaces. So a front-to-goal striker whose favourite position is usually wide left. He's right-footed. So he wants to cut inside, get onto that to that right foot. He's quick and he's strong. My worry about him would be his decision making, which I don't think is great, and he's going to have to speed that up. That's the thing that they all mention when they come across to the Premier League. You just have less time to decide what you're going to do on the ball. So he's going to have to speed that one up. Now, his club coach, or the club he's just left, Fluminense, Abel Braga, thinks the world of him. Now this is greatly to my surprise, but when Brazil called up their squad yesterday for forthcoming World Cup qualifiers, and he's not in it, but his name was mentioned as a player that the coach is looking at. I'm amazed by that. I think they've got so many other players, more proven players in that position, that to go for someone who was really didn't shine in the South American under-20s when Brazil couldn't even qualify, that's a surprise to me, and I don't rate him that highly. I think there is a rough diamond there. I think you'll get something out of him, but I do think he has to go through a period of adaptation, and he may well frustrate you a little bit, especially in the early stages.
I've got a sub question for Mina, Patrick, if I may, on your behalf.
Go for it. Mine was actually going to be based on the footballing answer that Tim gave, but no, if you've got a wine-related sub question,
no. I haven't actually. But you go.
You're giving me a really bad impression of Ben now. I'm definitely going to get divorced.
Well, this is going to live with you for some time, I'm afraid. So you may as well bring a bottle of wine with you next time, Mina. But Patrick, you go for your question first.
No, so the former Hull coach.
That's
Silver
exactly what I was going to ask. That's exactly what I was going to ask.
How would he try and get the most out of him? Because the transformation he made at Hull, from a man who worked wonders in Portugal, seemed to me
Sorry. Can you start from the front? Because I missed the beginning of what you're talking about. Walter Mazzarri?
Away again.
Clinking the glasses.
I heard it. So we're talking about Marco Silva is the new Watford manager, former Hull manager.
Yes.
Go ahead, Patrick.
And as Marco Silva was the new manager, he coached a lot of the players at Hull and made them a lot better than the sum of their parts. And I wonder if he has that reputation coming from Portugal. He's the kind of coach to get a lot out of, say, rough diamonds or maybe one-dimensional players and really sort of bring someone on.
Is he that guy?
Yes.
Firstly, he is above and beyond so much better than what you had before in Walter Mazzarri. He's a guy who really understands nutrition, posture, studying videos, looking at what it means to really bring the best out of his players. More than that, he understands tactical schemes. He's obsessed with football. And I do think that Watford have had a good transfer campaign. He has the character to really know how to speak to different players, whether or not that's, like giving them the confidence required to bring out their best, or sometimes treating them with a little bit of tough love. But he is genuinely a guy that can take this team a lot further. And Walter Mazzarri, and for me, the reason why he couldn't make it is because sometimes he's so obsessed with details that he tends to overlook bigger details, if that makes any sense. Sometimes when you're looking at such fine points in a thing that you're missing the big picture, so you'll be like trying to organize your defense and asking them how to defend a corner, but then you're missing the fact that your striker hasn't got a man on him, because you're telling them how they should be positioning themselves around, the attacking midfielders. He's that kind of guy. Whereas Silva is the kind of person who really understands the big picture. I think that because he's obsessed with football in a way where he's more of a winner than he is trying to prove himself on a tactical level. And his ability to speak to players and communication skills is what's going to become important when it comes to bleeding youth, when it comes to bringing out the best of players who haven't reached their levels before. And he had more time in Hull, then I really think he would have made a bigger difference than he already managed. So definitely that's kind of your star signing.
I tell you what, your star signing as well is Andre Gray. You got a fantastic centre forward there.
Well, this is true, but obviously it's the World Football phone-in, and I know that Mina's part of multiple pundit panels because I've seen her wonderful performance with the former Everton fullback, which is a YouTube video to savour for all to see in regards of Ireland and Italy clashing.
Please tell more.
Go on.
Please tell us more.
It's so worth it. She's mentioned it before in the World Football phone-in about being dismissed by former pros and mentioned that he might have played for Watford. But no, he played for Everton, and my friend set me onto the video, and it's just absolutely brilliant when he's trying to explain sort of journeyman Premiership pros are as good as Daniel De Rossi, and Mina's look on her face is one of utter surprise. And
I remember this one now.
But so it was, the answers were great, so thank you very, very much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the call as well, really appreciate it. Okay. Now, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but we have had a decent joke here. We have had a decent joke. Who wants to hear it?
I do, please.
Okay. Amina, you want to hear it as well?
I think I have help then, but yeah, go for it.
Richard in the Badlands of Belsize.
That's too much espresso at this time of night. You should know.
I know, right?
Is it Belize or Belsize Park? I think it's the Badlands of Belsize Park in North London, but it could be Belize because he leaves out the park. Anyway, he says, remember we were talking about whether there had been any priest in your respective regions who played football.
Yeah.
And Richard points out that Jesus himself played in goal. Because Jesus saves, after all.
He saves, yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Martin Chivers scored from the rebound, if I remember rightly.
Come on. Martin Chivers.
Well, I remember that daubed. I remember that daubed on the wall, somewhere when I was a kid.
Oh, right.
Jesus saves, but Chivers scores from a rebound.
Okay, and Chivers was the Tottenham centre forward, in case any youngsters haven't got a clue who Tim's talking about. Blonde-haired centre forward, as I remember it as well. Which is like the current centre forward for Tottenham, is the point I was trying to make. Anyway, Terry says, when the last Pope died, there was a guy from Italy who wanted to throw his hat into the mix. as well. I think that's the footballing mix, is it?
When the last Pope died?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
What do you mean?
Okay, no. I was just wondering if there was somebody who was referring to the same conversation we're having about priest.
Yeah, so the Pope wanted to... Okay, no, I don't understand what
don't
it is.
Don't worry, neither do I.
Yeah, move on.
And a few people...
Onwards and upwards.
Yeah, a few people have pointed out that Philip Mulrain is the former Northern Ireland international who played for Norwich, has recently been ordained as a Catholic priest. So thanks to David in Norwich. For
Northern Ireland.
Yeah. And Bernard in Newcastle points out that it was Peter Knowles who became a Jehovah's Witness, former manager. Yeah. And a lot of people have
the Wolverhampton Wanderers he played for, he did.
Yeah, I remember he did.
Peter Knowles.
Peter was a famous Buddhist, but yeah, okay.
Talking about Wolverhampton Wanderers in the 50s and 60s in the Black Country, I always love it when they talk about the Black Country because I think they've included me in that. Apparently, West Brom fans and Wolves fans would have a pint in the same pub prior to a local match. Jeff Astle and Derek Dugan. I don't know if it was in Smithwick, but Jeff Astle and Derek Dugan days. Tim should know them days, being a Dudley bloke. That's one of our listeners have said that.
Thank you. Have I got time to ask Mina my question?
What do you think of my accent, by the way? What do you think of my accent?
I thought it was pretty good. I couldn't tell that there was no
sounded
Nigerian
just like Lenny
in that
Henry.
At all. Yeah, you did, you know.
Dudley, isn't it? Dudley. Yeah, Argentina have just called up their squad, and there's two things that interest me. I mean, it's a new coach, Sampaoli, so you wonder where he's going to go. He had one friendly at full strength when he played Brazil with an attacking trident. He had Messi and Dybala behind Higuain. My little sub-question is, do you think Messi and Dybala can really work together? Now, I know Dybala is one of your lot, one of the Juventus team that we sent back to Turin to think again on Saturday. So you'll have an informed opinion on him. But the other question is, Higuain has been dropped, Aguero has been recalled, but the favourite, it seems, to lead the line is Icardi. Now, Icardi is someone from Inter Milan who, he grew up in the Canary Islands. I think he was there when he was 5 or something. He was born in Argentina but grew up in the Canary Islands and has spent his career between Spain and Italy. So, in Argentina he's never played. I haven't seen that much of him, but I've heard all the hype. Do you think he's the man to go for? So there are two questions that you can sneak in before the 4 o'clock news.
Yeah, and you see, Tim has got enough time to ask the questions, but you've got no time to answer the questions. So thanks a lot, both of you. Thanks, Mina. Thanks, Tim.
No, it's 3:56. Really? I can see it.
Go ahead, Mina.
I have an eye on the clock.
When it comes to pure talent, genuine raw talent, then Icardi has got it in bucket loads. He's a superb finisher. He's got a high footballing IQ. Really, there's not he understands different tactical systems, can work within it, versatile in his style of play. My only other issue with Icardi, and has been for many years, is his attitude, really. And that's kind of what he's been punished for, and perhaps the reason why he wasn't the man for Argentina before, because he had a lot of talent. But it's just that kind of thing where, I don't know if you heard about the autobiography that he decided to write, in which he talks about the fans and how he got into, a bust up with the Inter fans and started sort of a little bit peacocking and all of it and saying, you want to mess with me, I'll bring down the whole of my Argentine neighborhood and you'll see what it's really like to fight us, that kind of thing. He decided to write this biography, not get any authorization at the time from Inter, and they had a whole PR disaster on their hands because so many of those fans, many of them ultras, were demanding that he be stripped of his captaincy. Then he had that whole fallout in the sense that his wife belonged to his best mate.
Belonged, yeah, it's such a dodgy
concept. She's his ex-wife,
yeah. Isn't it?
So his wife is the former wife of his once upon a time teammate, and that caused a huge scandal in Italy. The way he's conducted his lifestyle hasn't been the calmest. It's always been sort of shrouded in scandal. So it was always like, how can he focus on football when so much is happening in his life, where he's writing autobiographies, where he's getting into fights, where he's constantly on social media sort of uploading photos of himself with his family, of the children, has adopted children. And so there's always been that. But when we talk about talent and pure talent alone, I think Icardi has it. Whether or not he works well with the rest of the Argentine lineup, I'm not so sure. But you asked me about Messi and Dybala as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they work together. Now, that's a really interesting thing, because a lot of people were saying that he would consider going to Barcelona because Messi's his idol, and that's always the player that he looked to. And it's true, he is obviously a huge admirer of Messi, as I think every single person is on this planet. But he also once made a comment about the fact that he never seems to be recognized for his talent, or that Messi doesn't really give him the time of day. And I feel like that stayed with him, because the way he said that seemed like a man that was really sort of annoyed at that. And rumours in Italy are that he doesn't want to move to Barcelona, no matter the price tag. He wants to stay at Juventus. He's been offered the number 10 shirt. Okay. And really, they're so close in that what they can do that I don't know if they work well together. I think they're better off with something different.
Yeah, Reverendinho should be the priest's name if he played in Brazilian football, apparently, says Jake in Dundalk. Thanks, Mina. Thanks, Tim.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk/5live.